glad you're still watching Morning at NTV. We are coming to you live from Scomania here at the Freedom City along NTV Road for this edition of yet again your premier morning show. We now go into our Tech Note discussion on corporate governance, how it offers sustainability to firms. And joining me to give us perspective and insights on this very pertinent topic is Jen Okot Pebitek. She's chairperson of the Chartered Governance Institute of Uganda. A very warm welcome, Jen.
Thank you.
P. Okot Pebitek.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Before we go any further, I would like to. Right now, I think I'm in the midst of greatness. Any relation to the literary giant?
He's my father.
Your father?
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing. Now,
Thank
I've
you.
read some of his works and informed part of the literature in the early stages of our high school study. It's great meeting you.
Great to meet you too.
Dive into corporate governance.
Yes.
And how it offers sustainability to firms in the conduct of business.
Yes.
First and foremost, what is corporate governance?
Thank you. Corporate governance is the manner in which organizations are governed.
That's right.
And there are four major principles. There's accountability, responsibility, transparency, and fairness. Accountability, and it mainly relates to the governing body, the boards, the commissions, or the trustees and senior management.
That's right.
So the trustees or the board are given powers. You find that they are the most powerful in an organization. To run the organization, they need to account for how they exercise the power to the people who granted them that power. And then responsibility, if they mismanage that power, for instance, they would then attract liability. And transparency relates to the transparency relates especially to the reports that these governing bodies give to the public and to the people who appointed them. Whatever the report in the newspapers and all that, is it what is on the ground? And then fairness relates to how do we treat the people we are dealing with. There are major stakeholders, minor ones. Transparency fairness means you do not make decisions in favor of the bigger people to the detriment of the younger people. Yeah.
Okay, that speaks generally to the processes and the systems that are put in place
Yes.
to ensure that organizations are run first and foremost smoothly, but also to the benefit of just about all stakeholders.
Yes.
Now, COVID-19 came with all its disruptions, and many organizations, firms, companies found themselves in a spot of bother.
Yes.
Some of them were trying to downsize in order to meet the increasing cost of doing business that had been conditioned by the fact that there was actually no business. And there was a section of people or stakeholders within organizations, companies and firms that were treated unfairly. I don't know, in your view, from the Chartered Governance Institute, have you had cases? Have people complained to you? Because we saw it in the papers, we saw it on TV, and people were saying, no, some of us have been put off our jobs, others have been sacked. What happened?
We are not that kind of organization that would get those kind of complaints, but what corporate governance requires is that you look after you identify your risks.
Yeah.
COVID was just mind-blowing. Nobody thought of that kind of risk. But as it hits you, what are you doing to mitigate the impact of that risk? Many people went into technology. It was a hard time, even for organizations.
Yeah.
If the money was not there, it was difficult to pay the staff. So some were laid off. Businesses died. There are businesses that did not recover from that. But the issue is, what risk management systems have you put in place? And therefore, how do you cover those risks as well?
Talking of risk management processes, companies within Uganda and Africa in general are often seen not to want to play to the tenets of corporate governance as per letter. Many CEOs, many managers are happy to circumvent some of these principles, and it is affecting productivity generally. How do we move to a level where everyone is taken care of, all the processes are respected, and that there is fairness across board?
Corporate governance, in answer to that, is about ethical business conduct. That's where you have transparency, accountability, and all that. Corporate governance is about the culture you create. So if in your, for instance, NTV, what are your values? The values we put in the receptions and all that, is that what the culture is? So the board is supposed to make sure that whatever they say is our values, integrity, runs through and is the culture. If anybody circumvents it, you punish, because culture is how we do things here. Culture also relates to what leadership allows people to get away with. You can see it in our political field as well.
Yeah.
If you, because a lot of people are allowed to get away with a lot of corruption, yes, it's a culture.
Believe that it is okay.
It is okay, and that becomes a culture. So corporate governance requires ethical business practice. And the issue is, if you don't, at some point you'll collapse. It is not sustainable to thrive on corruption or integrity or that kind of thing.
A breach of integrity.
Yes.
Now, of course, there are changes in the workplace conditioned by digitization.
Yes.
And this one comes to the fore. It tests some of these tenets. For example, integrity. When you're working with technology and you have workers' privacy, you are in a bit of a catch-22 situation. You need to respect the workers, but you also need to monitor what they do, how they do what they're doing. Is it in tandem with what you want them to do? How do we balance this?
Now, in corporate governance, you have what you call internal controls. That's what to look at.
That's right.
Yes, people are working, but what system have you put in place so that there are checks and balances? The risks we have are financial risks, where there's leakage and fraud, leakage of finances usually. What's your system there? There are operational risks.
Yeah.
We are human. We can make mistakes.
Anytime.
If I make the mistake, what is there to catch it earlier? So it's again, it's a risk management and internal control issues to make sure, yes, we are respecting your privacy, but you're also doing the right thing. And if you and the internal controls come in terms of policies. We have HR manuals. This is how you must relate and that kind of thing. Many organizations don't have those in place, but it's important, because then if the staff member takes you to the industrial court, if you have it in your manual, that's a very powerful defense for the organization.
You speak of something very interesting, the industrial court. We shall be coming to that a little later in this discussion. But allow me delve into the fact that most of our business landscape is littered with SMEs.
Yes.
SMEs that do not employ more than 150 or usually 50 people. Now, in such settings, the practicing good corporate governance is a real challenge, because at the end of the day, the owner of this industry or setting is a young man or somebody who is acting singularly, or sometimes as a co-owner with a wife or a brother. And the way recruitment is done, the way management is carried out, is more to the liking of the individual and the moods on a particular day. The institute should have mechanisms in place to ensure that SMEs are brought on board to embrace corporate governance and not necessarily be afraid of that kind of dispensation. Is that something you're working on?
That is correct. And the Uganda the Ministry of Trade and Industry, the statistics, it's over 90% of our businesses are actually SMEs. Yeah. What we have found, we do a lot of training, is that it's not so much that people don't want to do corporate governance, but it's more that they don't know.
They don't know.
They don't know.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of trainings, and we don't segregate big organizations, small organizations. If the organization can't afford, we make it a group kind of training so that it can be afforded. Yeah. So the issue is sensitization, that you need to be ethical in your business practice to grow, because it starts as SMEs. Eventually grows in. Look at Mulwana's empire.
Yeah, Mulwana's empire.
Yeah, it didn't start like that.
Mokwano Industries.
Exactly, Mokwano Industries. It didn't start like that. It started as a small family. It's still family, but it's big.
But it's big.
Yeah.
Okay. What you talk about, the fact that 90% being SMEs, well, no doubt, we all know what the economy runs, but this is widely seen as something that belongs to the high echelons of the corporate world. The bankers, the insurers. The person who is dealing in plastics and retail or wholesale business looks at the whole aspect of corporate governance as a bit of too much grandstanding and showing off. I don't know whether a mindset campaign is also necessary, because one of these days we are getting so many initiatives about mindset change.
Yes.
How is that being approached? Because the mindsets are really still not against, but reluctant. It's something that should be worked on. How is it going?
We have our patron is Patrick Bitature.
Patrick Bitature, yeah.
And he's got a passion. He says, people, the money is in Chikubo. We're talking of them as small, and they have the money.
Yeah, they have the money.
Yes. And he says what he got from the president one time was that the president is tired of Uganda being a supermarket. Okay. So we train corporate secretaries, the company secretaries. Those are the people usually in charge of corporate governance in organizations. Many small companies, it's not a must in the Company Act for a private organization to have a secretary, and many can't afford. But we want to build that capacity and see how to serve that particular section of the businesses in Uganda. Because if they get it right, they will grow in a proper manner. Okay. And corporate governance is not something that is out of this world. Right down to the family. It's how do we do things around us? What culture do we have? Do we do the right things? Corporate governance is about doing things right, okay, with integrity and all that. Yeah.
So that's a concept that we deal with at the basic household level.
Yes.
So that essentially means we are describing it the wrong way, perhaps, or a different way. What should begin? How should that be ingrained into the system? For example, for us to understand from a very early age that you need systems, you need processes, you need operations to be streamlined. Daddy at home doesn't want the little boy to direct how things are going to run in the family. Neither does the husband expect the wife to be overly domineering. So, I don't know, there's a contradiction. How can that be achieved?
I think, again, right within the family, we actually have a system of corporate governance, because the issue is, what are your processes? Yeah. What is the culture of that family? Family, yeah. Yeah. Where it's a family or where there's integrity, you'll have a child, you the father tells the child something, and the child says, Daddy, you want me to lie? The child is exhibiting, and we do that sometimes. And the child, why, Daddy, why do you want me to lie?
Tell the visitor Daddy is not around. Yeah. And then she goes and says, Daddy says he's not around.
Now that's a child who has integrity, because he knows you're around, but you're telling him that. Okay. So the issue is, what culture are we inculcating into our child? I was quite taken aback one time when I was impressed actually. Honorable Uchamuzi, I read in the newspaper. He said his child had asked, he wanted to stand for P7 elections for prefect. That's right. And had asked for money to buy sweets for children, and he refused. Now that is corporate governance. That is instilling in the child, you do not bribe.
You do not bribe to go to public office.
Go there on your merit, yes.
Okay, but in a society that expects these sweets, when you don't bring them, you lose the vote. That's very early stage.
And that's why corporate governance begins with the individual. What is it that you are doing to contribute to good corporate governance? There's a lot of corruption in the society, but what do we as individuals, what are we doing? Okay. Otherwise, it's not sustainable.
Okay, let's get to a point that I'd spoken about a little bit earlier, the industrial code and how companies treat or go about the issue of worker compensation and everything concerning that. The industrial court has been introduced into the country a little late, and there's a case of unfair dismissals, there's a case of unlawful dismissals. There is not a contradiction, but a lack of knowledge on that particular issue. So many people are put off their jobs in an unlawful way, and then they think they've been put off unfairly. Within the tenets of corporate governance, shouldn't we, as organizations, wherever you're working, be able to tell workers that exactly this is the reason, or this is how it is, than simply conjuring up some reasons that are sometimes a little bit ambiguous?
That is true. The bigger organizations have got manuals HR manuals, human resource manuals, that will let the staff know this is the behavior we expect. For instance, if you drink and come drunk to work, you either, some say dismissal outright, others is a final warning. So those organizations that have those policies are usually safer, because if you can show to the court that you followed those processes, you're okay. The others, first of all, you said the industrial court came late. It's the action has been handled in the main high court, and then eventually like commercial court also came afterwards. That all actions were being handled in the high court, but now these are the specialist courts. You'll find when we read the court cases, the judges usually favor the individual, especially if it's against the company, because it's a little somebody against a bigger company.
Huge entity.
So it's in the interest of that organization to make sure they have these policies in place and to make sure they follow them. Because the unlawful component is that this is what you're supposed to do. The Employment Act, first of all, gives you the basic, how you're supposed to treat staff. And your manual can only improve that. As long as you follow that, you'd be fine.
Okay. Yeah. Now, many of us, and including myself, tend to misunderstand the role of the board. The board is one of the clusters of management that is first hard to understand, but also many of the board members are rarely seen anywhere, to the extent that people question what are they doing. And then their appointments. Some people think they have a whole lot of say on what goes on within the company, but then you're told a board chairman has been picked from a society of former retirees, and you wonder, are they just giving money to a retiree to be active? What is the role of a board in an organization?
The role of the board is to direct and control that organization. Everything that senior management does is a result of what the board has told them to do, what the board has approved. So actually, it's just that we see the people who are active implementing, but the policy, the strategy, the bigger picture is by the board. And usually they are the most powerful organ in the organization. The picking of directors from certain sectors is because there's a requirement for diversity. Diversity. There needs to be diversity on the board so that we don't have what we call groupthink, everybody thinking the same. So that's why probably, and either the memorandum and articles or the law that appoints a government entity will list out for you the number of board members, and in government's case, who should be on that board. That's why you find they're picking people from certain sectors. That's important. Yeah, but the board is responsible for the governance of that organization, responsible for the culture of that organization. Responsible. Actually, what the board does is to delegate, because it has the power to run the organization, but it has got to supervise also. So it delegates its powers to management and the CEO to handle the day-to-day.
Thank you very much. Jane Okot, BBTech, chairperson of the Chartered Governance Institute, for the insight and perspective on corporate governance and how it can sustain firms in business and be able to bring about productivity. That does it for Tech Note. You've been hearing everything corporate governance, so the next time there is a bit of challenge in how you reach or conduct this business and you're told this is not how it's done, this is how you're supposed to do it. However talented, however skilled you are, you've got to understand that there are systems, processes and operations, and you have to be able to follow them in order to ensure that productivity for the entire organization is achieved. That will do it for now. I'm Chris Higenyi, but of course, Morning at NTV continues. You can also be part of the conversation. Hashtag Morning at NTV on Twitter. You can also be part of the conversation on Facebook. We shall take a break, and Kickstarter will be right back, where Priscilla Regina Naloga shall be speaking to well and dancer and how that is evolving in the world of the COVID post-pandemic COVID era. Do stay with us.